Every child has the right to graduate with an I can mindset. When you meet a child anywhere in the world, they go from crawling to standing to running to thinking to laughing. And just when they're telling the world, look at me, I can, we send them to school.
I see trees of green. Red roses too. I see them blue for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, bright blessed days, dark sacred night.
Hello, everyone. Today, I bring to you a dialogue with Kiran Bir Sethi from Ahmedabad. Several years ago, observing her own son, she decided to create a school that would nurture in children the I can superpower. She founded the Design for Change movement. She was invited to speak at a TED conference, the only one held in India. Her video went viral. She started receiving invitations from all over the world to start that movement in their country. Today, Design for Change and I Can movement has spread to 70 countries and 2 million children are benefiting from it. So let's talk to Kiran. Hi,
Hey.
Kiran. How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
Wonderful. What's the painting behind you?
Actually, this is something my kids did.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so sometimes we used to just pick up canvases and, put some music on and paint. So this is just one of theirs.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
No,
I know this is like a precious opportunity for me. We haven't really sat over a chai and had just random conversations.
yeah, this is like a coffee with Kiran.
Oh my God, don't say that. That it's more open than coffee with Kiran. I just want to give you a little framing for like why I approached you, what we're going to do, and so on. You know that I'm doing this because to celebrate my father's birth centenary, and more so because I wanted to give my designerly kind of a curiosity an opportunity. And rather than like celebrating a person, I wanted to celebrate an era. And because I think independence was like a milestone in India's evolution. And there was a spirit, there was an ethos of a kind that inspired imagination in every field of life. It wasn't just politicians driving change, but it was everybody in their own field. So many institutions were created. One of them you and I benefited from. And I want to celebrate that kind of a mindset and ethos, because I think there is value to that.
Sure.
And in that context, actually, as a part of my work as a design researcher, and these days I call myself an ethnographer of imagination.
Oh, that's a big title.
Yes. So what came to my mind was a book written by Howard Gardner called Creating Minds, an anatomy of creativity seen through the lives of Freud, Einstein, Picasso, Stravinsky, Eliot, Graham, and Gandhi. And his curiosity in writing that book and researching for that book was he believed there was something in the air in that era that these contemporaries were able to apply their curiosity, their imagination, and their creativity to transform the society with their own innate capacities. Yeah. And so that book stayed in my mind for 25 years. And now, as I was going through thinking about the evolution of India, I realized that there was something in the air all these years that has inspired various people to work in their own domains of work, such as yourself, or be it Poonam, or anybody else, all the people that I've been inviting to this dialogue. So what is that space is what I want to hear. So like as designers, you and I know that space in the air and space in the mind is what we fill in with our own ideas, right? Or other people's ideas. You inspire ideas. You don't give ideas to people, right? So I want to talk about that space in the air and space in the head that has inspired you. And we're going to have a conversation about how did that allow you to breathe freely and, spread that oxygen and creativity in the world.
Sure.
Does this make sense?
Yeah. In fact, it's interesting that you say all of this because you mentioned Howard Gardner. He's a very dear friend of mine. And I've just finished writing my book. And Howard's written the foreword for the book.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of writing the book sort of compelled me to go and figure out what is it that lent itself to my becoming who I am, and what are the seeds that were planted in my childhood. What were the experiences I had? Who were the people I met? Why was this idea of possibility such a strong word in my own upbringing? So I think a lot of it maybe is fortuitous that I'm here talking to you because I've just finished. In fact, just today, the last edits were put to the book, and we will be launching it on the 2nd of December. So yeah, so I'm happy to kind of just share what I learned through this journey of writing the book, what it meant.
That's beautiful. So there is synchronicity in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's surprising that you mentioned Howard, and yeah.
I do believe so. So I'm not religious. I'm
Yeah.
not superstitious, but I do believe when people lead life with certain values, curiosities, and kind of urge to explore the world, those journeys create intersections and parallel paths.
Sure.
So we were probably running in the same direction. Our curiosities, we did intersect once in a while, but this is going to be a longer stop where we can pick up some batata vada or something from.
Yeah, we can't. Here, it's the big thing is vada pav.
Yes.
Vada pav is a big.
Wonderful.
Yes, let's start.
So let me ask you a question. What was in the air? And I'm not, see, again, I want to just clarify, I'm not interested in what you did.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in the space you explored and what you saw, what inspired you, what triggered your ideas, imagination, and so on. Yeah. So what did you see in the air, and has that air changed?
Well, I think if I'm talking about the air that I inhabited and I took from in terms of when I was young, I think there was so much of it that was the conditions that allowed me, and I say that out of the fact that we were three, Poonam, my brother, and myself, Pankaj, and me, and we were really lucky in right off the bat to be surrounded by design and possibility from my father. And I think seeing that as part of your upbringing sort of started cultivating a way that we would think of life and each other and spaces with those sensibilities, unbeknownst to us. I mean, I'm talking about when you're young, you don't quite know why aesthetics matter, or why those things come together to create a certain harmony, and how does these functions flow. But I think being the youngest was an added advantage. I think because I was the youngest, I had a lot more freedom to explore without being directed. Because I think by the time I came in, we were the third. And so I was literally, I grew up without embarrassment. And I think that's the big one. You know, I'm told of times when I was very young and we would go to Koshi's restaurant in Bangalore. That was our favorite thing. Once a month, we would probably go there, and there was a jukebox. And I would ask my father to play a particular song that I liked. And apparently I would take off and start dancing in the whole restaurant. And my brother and sister would be saying, Papa, tell her to sit down. This is so embarrassing. And my dad would say, just let her go. So I think that let her go pretty much became my story. You know, so there were no rules, and you have to do this, or this is how you have to behave because you're a girl, or this have to behave because you're a child. This is how you have to behave, you know, in all of the so-called norms that we set ourselves in society. I think I had a lot more freedom to challenge those, explore those. And I think so much of what I see my becoming, whether coming to NID, was just out of chance. I mean, both, I don't think even Poonam graduated 12th. So we're quite uneducated, you know, didn't graduate 12th and still got into NID, which was kind of all of those things we challenged. I got married before my sister, again, challenging those, you know, so all of those so-called society norms not shackling me meant that I was living in a space and an air that kind of started telling me it's possible. Mm-hmm. Why not? Who said? You know, so when you start looking at the world and saying, but why not? And who said? Why can't it be done? Mm-hmm. You actually start believing that. And then when you start putting those into play and they start working for you, you start believing it even more. And then eventually that becomes your go-to disposition of the way you look at life and say, if something is possible, why not? You know, so maybe a lot of it, I believe, has to do with my childhood.
That's wonderful. I'm going to ask a philosophical question. So you kind of had that kind of freedom in your head. Yeah. Freedom from fear and inhibition. I would say you didn't say fear, but I'm calling it fear also. But I think inhibition and fear go hand in hand. But the world was not without things that you should fear. You know, like what comes to my mind is Samrat Ashoka, who saw so much pain and went in search of his truth, or just like Buddha. But your journey is different. It almost seems like the pain and the suffering around you and the ugliness was invisible to you, was it?
No, I don't think so. You know, so much of what I've done, at least in terms of even the school, etc., have not been at all without challenge. Of course, they will be there. I've kind of figured out myself to give too much of that focus to those moments don't allow you the freedom to keep thinking. And I think for me, I've chosen not to. Of course, they will come. It's never going to be easy. You just get better at dealing with it. And I think that's what has happened over life. And I mean, there's been death, and there's been loss, and there's been grief, and there have been challenges, all of it. I think all of us have our share of those challenges. But I've been also supremely lucky. I mean, I keep saying that. I've not reached here on my own. I've not reached here because I was magically gifted. Not at all. I think so much of it has been the generosity of spirit and grace and people around me. And I think in many ways, also because of the fact that I was opening myself to life to say, I'm here and surprise me and I'm ready, kind of allowed maybe those resistances that would have otherwise come into space. Oh, I'm a girl, I can't. Oh, I'm young, I can't. Oh, I am not married. You know, all of those things that I'm talking about 40, 50 years ago that we were tuned to be. So it didn't necessarily cause friction. Otherwise, there is that friction. It will. I mean, I've been told, you're a woman, you can't do this, or you're too young and you can't do this. And how do you start a school? You've not even got education. So all of that, I think you have to figure out what you're not hearing, what you're not going to listen to. So
That's very profound. You have to figure out what you're not listening to, and how do you
yeah,
do that? How do you do that?
because I think I was so curious about the work I was doing. I just didn't have the time to think about all the naysayers. The deep, endless curiosity that I had about, oh God, how does learning happen, and what is this happening? And I think that consumed me so much, and it still consumes me, that I mean, where's the noise? Don't have the time, So again, I think to find something that you're this passionate about, and my husband keeps calling. He said even passion is a diluted word. It has to be obsession to do the kind of stuff you're doing, right? Because you can be passionate about many things, but you're obsessed about one thing, and then it just becomes all consuming. And I think I was very lucky to find that for having the skill sets in design, and then having the purpose with education. So they both sort of had a beautiful marriage. And for me, that lent itself to, endless curiosity. And so I think for me, that allowed me to lessen the noise that would otherwise come.
Now, I watched your YouTube videos, and I do know that you attribute your first trigger to forming your initiative to your son.
Yes.
Isn't that? And then now your movement, I would call it, has grown to over 300,000 children around the world.
2 million.
2 million, okay. And this just with a simple message, I can, right? That's the message, right? And you know what is funny is, did Obama borrow your slogan?
That's what I say. I said it long before Obama. So,
I know. So you've not had any interaction with him, right?
I did it actually, and when he'd come to India in 2010, but that was after I'd started Design for Change. I had the good fortune of, some of us were invited to come and meet him when he was in Mumbai. So just, it was a brief encounter where he sort of met us, and it was just like a photo op, yeah.
No, did he have any reaction to I can?
No.
No? Okay. So that was more on a funny part, but I want to get back to my curiosity. So, do you read newspapers, or are you now mostly on internet?
Yeah, no more newspapers, yeah.
Do you follow news?
Not as much. In fact, there are times when I choose not to, because I just get sort of weighed down by everything, especially what's going on. But I think if it's important, I try to sort of hook into those.
So I made a dialogue yesterday with the two people who founded the Media and Cultural Studies program at TISS, Anjali Montero and KP Jaisankar. And I dedicated that to Charlie Chaplin. And I don't know if you watched his The Great Dictator, where he at the end he gives that long speech.
Wonderful one, yes.
Yeah? So that I've put right in the beginning of my video, edited video. But the reason I'm bringing it up is that shows a mindset where he personally has gone through a really hard life. He's surrounded by hardships in that era, but he gives a perspective through his humor, his films, and his message in that specific speech that creates a new view, new lens to look at the future, a hope, a curiosity, and so on. How do you create that when people open newspapers, internet, WhatsApp, whatever? There's much to worry about. To your children, what do you tell them? How to deal with all that information that's surrounding them?
I think one of the things I've learned, and it happened while listening to children, was this whole burden that often gets put onto them to say, oh, you must change the world, and the world is difficult. And in all fairness, if you look at the trends that we are actually at a great time in human history, right? We have greater health, and we have longer lifespans. We have greater access to medical care. So I think that's, to look at it in terms of the larger picture, we are in a better time. And having said that, I think the one thing we keep telling our children, you don't have to change the world. You have to change yours. And when you put that into a small little perspective and space to say, it's that one day, it's that one person, it's that one space, it gives them the confidence then to say, oh, I can do this.
Mhm.
You know, and then as you then continue to build the skill sets, and like you kind of exercise the muscles to say, oh, I could do it today, and I can do it tomorrow, and I can do it today, and I can do it tomorrow. That kind of gives them that sort of confidence in their ability to figure out that I'm going to be able to navigate the world with a greater confidence. So I think for me, that's one thing that we continue to focus on at Riverside. And the I can is part of that. I can do it today, and I can try today. And it's that focus on the moment and today that constantly builds and exercises that muscle for tomorrow. I don't think we have ever in education talked about that. We've kept telling children, you are the future. One day you will do it. And in that one day, we've deferred the promise inanely. And then by the time the child is 18, we say, my God, I don't have the skill sets. So putting that back into the today and giving the space and the opportunities to be, to add a little bit of kindness today and a little bit of agency today, is, I have seen, a great source of comfort. And then when the kids build that comfort over time, we've been tracking our kids in colleges, and they write back to us and saying, oh, it's given us a confidence to say no. You know, just yesterday, one of my alumnus came, and she's in one of those top end colleges. And she said, it was easy for me to say, no, I don't want to go drinking. I don't want to go partying, and I'm okay. And with ease, she put that out there. And she said that I could say that. I could say no. And we were never taught that. We were never given that lens to say, can you do that today? I keep looking at the complete irony. We put math every single day of a child's life for 15 years, but we never put agency into every single day. For some reason, math is highly important. Every single day you must learn math and social studies. But agency, kindness, and character were never part of the daily curriculum. So reframing what requires to be done on a daily basis and bringing it back to tangible daily actions, and they could be small and elegant and simple and sweet. It doesn't have to be large, but then you're giving that muscle, that ability to go forward.
I love that word muscle, because as you were speaking, I was developing a picture in my mind. And what came to my mind was, I know from, again, watching your videos, that you give them an exercise of go find a small problem you can solve today,
Totally.
right? And that gives them the muscle. It's almost like you give them a light dumbbell to build a muscle with. You don't get people to lift big weights in the beginning. You give them dumbbells.
Yeah. Or suddenly throw it onto them and say, now you must be carrying it.
Yeah.
You know, because now you're 18. It's unreasonable to expect that will happen, right? So I think that's something we have consciously timetable for and implemented and seen the impact of that going forward.
So from personal perspective, I wanted to ask you, you started Riverside, right? School. What made you want to go global?
I didn't. I had no ambitions or thoughts. I did, and it was not that there were plans for it. It just so happened that opportunities came on. In fact, this idea of Design for Change, which I started in 2009, was not part of our plan at all. Hell, running a school itself is a full-time job. Imagine wanting to do other things. But I think it just happened to come as an opportunity. A friend of mine, Venkat, had decided, I don't know if you know him, about Give India. I don't know if you're familiar with Give India. So my friend Venkat had actually started that in 2001 or two, same time that I started Riverside. And he had envisaged this massive concept called the joy of giving, which is now called Dan Utsav. It's a festival giving. He said, we must do this, and India must do acts of giving. And he was so animatedly talking about the fact that, the CEOs were going to do a fashion show and raise funds, and the rickshawalas were going to do this. And there were lots of this conversation. It was all adults. And I told him, I said, but Venkat, children doesn't understand that right off the bat. So he said, then you do that. Why don't you take that as something that you want to design? And pretty much that's how it happened. Design for Change was created as a way to get children in India to be part of this festival, starting with Gandhiji's birthday of Be the Change, and to celebrate the idea of being the change. And the Feel, Imagine, Do, Share framework was a framework, a set of tools that any child anywhere in India could use, right? They didn't need language or they didn't need technology, or they didn't need, resources. They just needed their heart, their mind, and their will to do. And it was fabulous. It was just amazing what we were getting back in terms of the stories.
And did that happen in Bangalore?
It happened across India. It happened in 30,000 schools.
Okay.
And then it just so happened that I got the opportunity to speak on TED that year, when TED had come to India for the first time, and I think the last. It was when the TED talk went live, and I remember Chris Anderson had written a mail saying, Kiran, your talk is live and it's gone viral. I had no idea what that meant. I'm talking about this pre-internet, pre-Insta stuff time. And that's when people started reaching out and saying, oh, we love it. And we see the need in Taiwan. We see the need in Bhutan. We see the need in Brazil. And people start reaching out to say, we would love to do this in our countries. Literally, that's how it went. So I put everything online, made it open source, and said, my God, this is awesome. Please take it, do it in Taiwan. Please take it and do it here. And that's really how it went global. We're in 70 countries today.
So this is another interesting question comes to my mind. I had a conversation with Jeru Billimori. I'm guessing you know her. She also started something, it grew, and she's now become like a catalyst of just different kinds of community networks doing socially relevant projects. But then she moved to Netherlands. Yeah. Did you ever, now that the world is your oyster, how do you feel? Do you feel have you ever had a desire to be somewhere else other than Bangalore?
I'm not in Bangalore, I'm in Ahmedabad.
Oh, you're in Ahmedabad. Oh, sorry, I didn't know that. Okay.
Pune is in Bangalore. Yeah, no, not. I think Ahmedabad has been fabulous. I think, and I think it needs a certain size of. I now, in hindsight, think of Ahmedabad and say, my God, I think the universe conspired to make sure it was in a place like Ahmedabad. It was in a place where I am in a little, corner of the city on the banks of the Sabarmati River, diagonally opposite Gandhiji's ashram. So I think all of it was meant to be in a size and a space to be able to plant the seeds of this idea. I think it would have possibly got drowned in a place like Mumbai or Bangalore or something. And maybe it needed a certain sanctity of space and time. And for me, the city has been absolutely amazing.
Oh, now I get it. So that's why it is by the Sabarmati River, your school.
Yes. It's on the banks where Gandhiji started his Dandi March.
So that takes me to another question. Even on your picture for Zoom, it's you with Gandhi, right? Why? What does Gandhi mean to you?
I think I grew into understanding what I think I need from him, not what he means to me. It's really what I see. I think I found the need to continue to have stamina for the work I did. I mean, I have the passion and I have the idealism, but stamina is a very different sort of skill or source that you need. So I think for me to understand his life through the concept of stamina, 30 years, looking at idea for freedom, which was unimaginable, an audacious idea, and then having the stamina to stay with it and be true to it across the number of challenges he's had. I think for me, it was a reminder whenever there would be times I get tired or fatigued or, oh my God, what's happening? And then I have his cutout as a reminder. I stand in front of him and say, oh my God, I have to meet you one day up in the heavens. I better be able to see you in the eyes and say, I didn't give up. So for me, just to remind myself of stamina, sense of equanimity, sense of humor, must have all of that to do the work you do.
I am so glad amongst all the 37 people I've spoken to till now. No, not 37. You are my 40th dialogue. You're the first one who proactively brought up humor.
Yeah, you have to. My God, you have to. You can't be in a place like this and be bleak, and the world doesn't need your bleakness and your seriousness. It just needs your compassion, your sense of humor, because I think for me, it's so important to be able to have joy, and it's such a, people keep talking about happiness. For me, joy is just a better word. So for me, yes, you have to have dollops of sense of humor.
Have you read a book called Tools for Conviviality by Ivan Illich?
I've read other books of Ivan Illich, but not this one.
I recommend you should read it because you would find a lot of resonance with it. So he defines conviviality as playful sobriety.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I see what in your work, you are creating a convivial society.
Yeah.
And
I like what also effervescence. I keep thinking that's a nice, there's a kind of idea of contagion in effervescence. How do you put those bubbles of joy into each other? I think that's also something that I find resonates with me and
absolutely. And people build homes one brick at a time. You're molding the future one child at a time. So tell me a little bit about your book that is you just finished writing, and I'm the witness to the news that it is just completed.
Oh my God, it's been such a journey. It's called Every Child Can, because that's really what actually it's since we're NIDians, it's the opportunity to write the book actually came from a fellow NIDian. She was a wonderful girl called Bonita Shimre, who's sort of who was with HarperCollins. I think they had a division that they created for design or design in education. I'm not quite sure what that particular department was, but she had heard one of my talks with another NIDian, Sajid, and she reached out to say that I think from all the NIDians that have graduated, I'm possibly the only one who's used the design process in starting a school. And she said, that might be an interesting story to say, how do you put the design process to start a school? You could do it in other fields, but school. So, and I've not given much thought to it to say, do I have a story to tell? But I think it was 20 years of Riverside, and I thought maybe now there is a story to tell. And it came at the right time for me because I was feeling a little, nostalgic about all the years and looking at the story of what we'd built. I said, maybe there's a story to say. So set out to write the book with two friends of mine, and just today had the final edits and put it together, and it'll go in for print on Tuesday. But yeah,
But if you had to tell somebody, if you had to tell us somebody, it's a story of, what would you say?
I would say it's a story of how the design process can empower children by basically everything is not by chance, it's by design. Empowering children must happen not by chance.
And what do you mean by design?
I think the idea of intentionality, I feel that's critical. I feel so much in education has always been incidental or by chance, so it can happen by person, but it's never been by design and intention. So the idea of getting the child to be part of that journey was just for me the most incredible learning. So
I hear Ranjan's voice in your words.
Oh, Ranjan was I'm such a fan. And Ranjan was, in fact, a great mentor. He was with us even for Design for Change. He was part of our jury for Design for Change, and such a generous a person in terms of ideas and thoughts and knowledge. He was just so, he used to keep saying, publish or perish. That used to be his big mantra of life. You must publish, you must get things out there. Yeah, I think it's a great influence.
So for the audience of this dialogue, can you like shortly tell what Riverside School is about?
Oh, Riverside School is a vibe. I keep saying. I think it's more like a lab to iterate possibility into action. You know, if you think about something, if you think that that's going to work, and you work along with the children to figure out if it's possible, that's what Riverside does. And in many ways, it provides an opportunity for people to see education of what it can be, not what is. You know, you come here and you say, oh my God, I didn't think this was possible. You know, and to take those ideas of possibility back to your own places, for me, it has been what Riverside's done a lot of.
So is it a full-time K through 12 school?
Yeah. Pre-K through 12. So our kids
Oh,
come
it's
in
also
at
preschool also.
Yeah. And we go all the way to 18.
Wow. And so this is interesting. Now I'm not comparing, but what I'm going to tell you what I'm reminded of. When I think, and I've followed you for a long time, when I think of you, how you are nurturing minds of young children to become adults with a new lens on life, I'm reminded of many of my friends in my school, or not school, but at NID, and later I've met, who came from Rishi Valley Foundation School, right? And there are many schools around the country. Do you see any parallels between those of, I'm sure you have friends who studied there, and the way they have turned out to be as adults, and how some of your children have turned out to be adults? Do you see any parallels?
Absolutely. I think even Krishnamurti's basic focus was on the heart, you know, the whole idea of the heart and then the mind. And for me, I'm going to use the parlance of design. Design always starts with empathy. It always starts with the heart, right? And then it goes to imagination. So for me, while the language might be different from what Krishnamurti had put into the Valley schools, and his focus on mindfulness and focus on observation and intentionality and empathy was such a strong focus. And I see that, I mean, I remember Dhara. I think there were a couple of my seniors who'd come out from the Rishi Valley School. And there was a way they would look at life which was not encumbered by rules.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that came from a very deep sense of curiosity, not, oh, I want to be an activist, I want to challenge. It didn't come from that space at all. It came from a space of genuine concern, and it came from a space of inclusion. And I think for me, that was so unusual, coming from a very proper convent school. I mean, I was brought up, I mean, in Bangalore, where we went to Bishop Cotton Girls' School, and there were rules, and you had to be compliant, and then you had to be good girl, and you know, there was a certain fit frame in which you had to be put into. And that's what I found was so refreshing when I kind of came to NID. I think NID was a big game changer for me. I think not even the Valley schools as much became the blueprint of Riverside. NID was the blueprint. NID for me, of what I experienced there, the joy, the curiosity, the sheer abandonment of thinking was just so profound for me, especially that I must have taken so much of it in, that when I did finally start the school, I used to reference so much the jury process, the portfolios, the sitting in circles, the environmental exposure, all of that I brought into Riverside by saying it had done such a big impact for me when I was 17. I think kids at 17 must have access to that sort of thinking and agency.
Obviously you've read Krishnamurti.
Yeah, of course.
And so how much would you attribute your thought process, your imagination being touched by Krishnamurti's thoughts?
I think it's an amalgamation of all kinds. I would say more Howard, because I think his books made the bigger impact on me, especially Frames of Mind and Multiple Intelligences. I think for me that was a big.
I've read all of those, by the way.
Yeah, so that was for me, I think, my influence. And then, of course, I think the second place that was very deeply impactful was Reggio Emilia. When I went there and I experienced firsthand how they see the image of a child when they're young. Oh, just changed everything, the way I looked at young
Tell
children.
me more about that.
So I don't know if you're familiar with the Reggio Emilia approach, but it's a place in Italy, north of Italy, which has started this Reggio Emilia approach to education. Essentially, they as teachers, they don't call themselves teachers; they call themselves pedagogistas. Basically, they're researching children by observing them and basically understanding their rhythm by just being allies to children. And the way they have reimagined at 0 to 6 years and what children's competencies are, the respect they have for children at young age, the way they understand stimulus and provocations I was just blown away. I said, my God, this is what it should be. This is the kind of, respect you have to give to childhood. And I came back deeply moved by that experience. And so that I think would be a big influence. Howard, of course, his theories of multiple intelligence were a big influence.
So did you and Jinan go to NID at the same time?
No, I think Jinan was either young. He's possibly younger than me or older. I don't know.
Okay. But
I do know. I'm familiar with, I haven't seen his work firsthand, but I hear he's doing some incredible work.
Because I've done a dialogue with him also.
You have.
Excellent. If you go to my playlist, you'll get to hear that also.
Yeah. He's also challenged everything that we understand about play and childhood and,
Yeah, and I did a dialogue with Geeta also.
Wonderful.
She has some amazing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the first name that comes to my mind when I say, I was not talking about Bhagavad Gita. So that takes me to another, I just accidentally said Bhagavad Gita, but this space that, and when I talk about space, there is no boundaries to the space, right? Space is an infinite space, but there is a definition because you can smell it, you can feel it, you can feel it with something. In that space that you occupy, or Krishnamurti occupies, or this school in Italy that occupies, or Jinan occupies, what are the qualities and characteristics of this space? I'm not talking about just your space, but the space occupied by all of these similar people of similar curiosity and intentions. How would you describe that space?
I think, and of course, I'm speaking more for myself and maybe less for what they might be looking in the space. But I think it is occupied by possibility, curiosity, and I think the desire to experiment. I think the confidence of experimentation, and maybe not even the desire. I think it comes from a combination of questions. I mean, it's always starting with why not and who said, and what if. I think that big what if question is such a big part of this space. It doesn't come from what is. So the ease with which one can look at questioning the status quo, I think that it comes from a place of ease. It comes from not a place of activism as much as a place of genuine curiosity. I think that's important to make a distinction. I don't think any of us are coming as activists and say, oh, we must be changing the world. I don't think, I never wanted to set out to change the world at all. I was so curious about the way my son was learning, and could there be a better way for learning to happen? I came from a space of genuine empathy and curiosity. It didn't come from at all of a space of, I will go and change the world. So I think maybe the space allows for kindness and joy, and it must, otherwise I don't think one can do the work one does if one is constantly angry or have friction, or is, I don't think those emotions will allow the space to sort of glow and grow the way it should. So I think maybe
So,
something's
so I'm going to ask something that just popped up in my head. And this is a part of my personal curiosity and journey. So I'm not religious, but the feel I get in this space that even I'm a habitant of, it feels different. It's like when you go to the ocean or you go to the mountain, it feels different, right? This space that you just described feels different. There's some kind of mellowing of the ego there. There's some kind of freedom that one feels, some kind of humbling effect that one has in that. And it begins to look so much like some of the what you would call the religious gurus or religions have talked about, but I still don't feel religious. So what is this? Do you think being in that mindset takes you in a direction of religiosity, spirituality, or where is it taking you? I'm sure as you live life, I'm not saying as you grow old, because you're not growing old. Yeah. As you live life and accumulate more learning in this space, where is it taking you?
I think for me, two words keep popping up at this point: love and gratitude. I think it's just this. And I think because this place has gratitude, it seems spiritual, because very often in a space of worship, you go with gratitude, right? And maybe that's the feeling you get in a place of worship, and you're either grateful or you seek blessings, etc. I think because of this space I get the repeated feeling of gratitude, the feeling of love. I find that that's an expansive word. It really is so important in the work you do. You can't do this without love. You can't. I don't think it's possible at all to be that sort of open and ready and inviting. You have to invite, and love does that. You can't resist, and you're not saying, okay, this is against you or this is versus. Those words don't even exist. You just have to include, and you have to invite, and you have to open. So these are words, I think, that possibly are around the idea of love and gratitude. So I think maybe that's possibly the reason it seems or it feels spiritual.
Okay, I'm going to ask another one. I'm not talking about the moments you sat down to write the book, but are there other moments when you stop and reflect over your journey?
There were, in the first many years, I didn't have the time to stop and reflect. It was just an all-consuming presence that one had to just do. I think over the last couple of years, there have been more times. COVID, of course, offered by force time to sit back, and it just gave the because there was no noise. The kids were not there. Otherwise, I live on the campus, so I'm surrounded by children all the time. So there was moments of silence, and I think in that silence there was this time to be able to look back. So I found that gave me some time, and I think maybe that's one of the reasons I accepted the idea of writing the book. Otherwise, yeah, I don't tend to do that too often, because I think for me, it's a journey done, and it doesn't constantly merit to look back. It's great, and one would look at it with charm to say there's a journey that we've gone to. but there's just so much that is in front.
So I understand that you don't think about the path you have traveled. What about you? Have you changed?
I'm sure I have. Uh, I'm less. Uh, Maybe I'm less uh, sort of. I think maybe there's a different way to say it. I think uh, I'm far more in the present, far more. That's I see that. I am. It is. There's just so much of clarity in the present. That's
And
what.
were you ever seeking it, or it just emerged?
Uh, it must have emerged. I don't think I consciously sought it, but I realize over time I am so clear about the present, and I'm so in the moment that I don't worry about. That's what I'm saying. I don't really go into the past because that's a present that has gone, and I'm not too worried at all about what will happen because I know that I will be present. That's all I know. I will be present, and everything will happen from that presence.
So now this is a very philosophical, deeply philosophical question. But do you think about death?
I don't think about it, but definitely I have found that mortality is playing a role in decision making, especially if for that's why I'm talking about the present so much more. That's why I keep saying I'm not going to delay the present. I'm going to do it today. If I have to do something, I'll do it. Because mortality is now a factor in, oh, I will come to meet you next year. I will do this next. That's just being too arrogant to think about the fact that you might stay here too long. So
it gives you a sense of urgency in not postponing anything, but doing it now.
yeah, maybe not even urgency as much as recognition that it is clearly far more a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, the present seems to be a better way to look at life.
Okay. So I'm going to share something about me with you since you brought up COVID. Because I think I've been bombarding you with questions. So I want to show you something. So over the last 4 years, I wrote 3 books.
Wow, my God. How did you manage? I couldn't even write one.
As a designer and design researcher, I've done a lot of work, traveled around the world, talked to so many thousands of people. And my friends from the design world expected me to write a book about design, like my process of co-creation. And one fine night at 3 o'clock, I woke up and wrote my first poem.
Wow.
That evening, I was at the mountain looking at the valley, and a feather came flying to me. I tried to catch it, it went away. I woke up at 3 o'clock and saw myself in that feather in that moment. And I wrote my first ever poem in my life. Since that day, for next 1 year, I kept writing poems. And one day my wife said, why don't you just put it all together in a book? So I wrote my first book and I called it A Window for a Home Without Walls. Yeah. And Bandari wrote a preface to it also. Then a year, 6 months later, one of my friend who's a bartender, his wife texted me in the middle of the night. And she said, Uday, I read your book in one go. She does creative activities for children, like a babysitter, and she's called Mary Poppins.
Oh.
And she said, I wish there was something like this where children could hear their own voice. I got this text message at 10 o'clock. I slept, woke up at 2 and wrote an entire book by 4 o'clock.
Oh my God.
About children's inner voice. And then I sent out messages to all my friends who had children. between age of 5 and 12, asking them to draw a sketch of a character comes to their mind who they talk to when they're upset, angry, or confused. And through all of those sketches, I picked up one which I liked the most, refined it, and created a character called Bibo. That's your inner child. And over 9 months, with help from another designer friend, he said, you have to illustrate it. And I said, I haven't illustrated, I haven't held a pen in my hand for 20 years. He says, no, you are an industrial designer, you're trained in design, you have to do it. I design the book only if you illustrate it. So I illustrated this book. This was my second book. It's also poems for children to help them revive their inner child. And a year later, I wrote another book called, can you read it?
Imagination and Consciousness.
Yes. This is also a book of 78 poems. The first book was designed by Mukesh Patel. And the third one was designed by a Korean friend who's a graphic designer also. So my point is, I discovered poetry and I connected my life, my designerly curiosity to poetry, and Bhandari explained why it happened to me through Iqbal's poem, which says, Hazaron saal Nargis apni benuri pe roti hai, badi mushkil se paida hota hai, budi mushkil se hota hai dida aur paida. And what he meant is, for a long time, a bird was languishing in a forest in darkness until a maven walked by. The moment the bird was ready to bloom into a flower, and his eyes fell on it, and a moment of appreciation happened. And he said, your designerly curiosity was imbibing the environment, which was not even paid attention to by you. And one day when it was ready to turn into a flower, your attention paid on it, and a poem happened. So I just wanted to share this moment with you. I felt inspired to tell you that. Have you ever written a poem?
I have. Often, there are times when I used to write a column for the Times of India and Indian Express when my kids were much younger. And so much of that came from my experience with them, and haiku, and I dabbled a little bit of haiku, a little bit of poetry, but not at all in the way you put together a book of poems. But I love the idea of cooking a little bit, or gardening, any of these things that are super therapeutic and, creative. And I think it's I've been always thinking of myself saying, I must go to Tuscany and do a whole how to cook the perfect pasta, retreat. And, that'll be such a great thing. Or do pottery, or always something creative.
Thank you. So we're coming towards the end of our call, but do you remember your first day at NID? The first day of foundation? Sorry?
Absolutely. I remember walking in, and I came twice. The first time I came for my interview. That was when when
you came in as a student.
When I came in as a student, I remember the first thing was coming in, that square below the auditorium?
Yeah.
All of us were gathered there. And I think it was Sethu or MGD Nair, possibly was calling our names. And we were all gathered there. And I remember distinctly my batchmate, Alamelu Venkatachalam. Okay, she was V, so she was, and mine was Kiran Bir. So I was at top of the list, and Alu was at the last, 24. And she came up to say, are you Kiran Bir? And I said, yes. She said, I'm Alamelu Venkatachalam. I'm the last on the list, and you're the first on the list. Let's be friends. It was just as simple as that. And we became fast friends through all of that time. But yeah.
So on those first days, do you remember anything about how you were initiated into the design world? Anything that anybody said, or any impressions that you have of your initiation?
It was Bhandari. I remember we were sitting on the lawn for the first time. I remember the whole idea of having a chai on the lawn with a faculty member. Unheard of, to sit and have a cup of chai and talk to him, and not call him sir and call him Bhandari. all of these were the initiation into the idea that learning can be unshackled and it doesn't have to be hierarchical, right? That was the first understanding of learning about what it could be in a design school. So besides, of course, the space and the exposed brick and the sheer aesthetics, it was that sitting in a circle with Bhandari, and he picked up a leaf. You know how Bhandari was? Super mad at different times. And he said, this is a leaf, is a leaf, is a leaf. And all of us didn't know what to say. We said, should we say something profound? What the hell is he asking? So, but it was that, the idea that you can be asked these questions. You just have to be okay with whatever you say. So.
That is so beautiful. So I'm going to give you one last question to end this session. So the whole purpose of this series of dialogues is I'm creating an archive of oral history of imagination. Yeah. For the next 100 years. So a child born 3 generations from now, when you or I won't be there, is entering Riverside School. What would you say to that child to initiate her into your world of imagination, just like Bhandari talked about leaf is a leaf is a leaf?
I would just say, you can be anything you want to be. Yes, you can. I have seen it play out in their eyes and then their smile when you say, they'll ask you something and say, yes, you can. And they say, what? And the journey starts like that. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. I hope you enjoyed this conversation.
It was completely different from all the other ones I've ever had with there. So thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.
किसी की मुस्कुराहटों पे हो निसार, किसी का दर्द मिल सके तो ले उधार, किसी के वास्ते हो तेरे दिल में प्यार, जीना इसी का नाम है। किसी की मुस्कुराहटों पे हो निसार, किसी का दर्द मिल सके तो ले उधार, किसी के वास्ते हो तेरे दिल में प्यार, जीना इसी का नाम है।